Hi, I'm Anna, and on this week's Saturday Adventure, I'm on the other side of the world. I've come to Tokyo, Japan to experience the cryptids of another culture. I've followed all sorts of creatures, critters, and monsters back home, but I knew I was way out of my element here. If I learned anything from Japanese cinema, the monsters here grew pretty big. I would need some protection before heading into the field. Standing at the edge of Tokyo Bay, I found what I was looking for. I'll admit I don't know much about Gundam, but Optimus Prime was my first crush, and giant robot gladiators have always held a special place in my heart. If a robot was the size of a house, and it could transform into something else, it had my attention. This 60-foot unicorn Gundam was unveiled in 2017 to stand guard outside the Diver City shopping center. I continued on foot along the bay, as this is prime kaiju territory. What I did find there became a grim historical marker. The 2020 Summer Olympics were to be held in Japan, but this was the very same day that the first victim of COVID-19 died in Tokyo. A month later, the virus had taken over the entire world, and the Olympics did not happen. I must say, I thought the Japanese subway would be much more difficult to navigate, but between translating apps and navigation apps, it was really no trouble at all. The New York subways had clearly set me up for success. Going on a mountain trip to old Japan. That's how I found myself in Shinjuku. Outside this station is the Tokyo you see on TV. Big buildings, flashing lights, people everywhere. I think every trip I took in Tokyo required a stop through Shinjuku Station. Luckily, Egg Slut was right across the street for a breakfast sandwich when I got hungry. I didn't come here just for the nostalgia of an American-style breakfast sandwich after my many weeks abroad. I was hunting monsters. While most girls loved Mothra, I always preferred Godzilla. He's the king of the monsters. Quick summary. Godzilla was either, depending on the storyline, created by or awoken by a nuclear bomb. He may have started as a Godzillasaurus, but he could also be an iguana. Godzilla first attacked a city in 1954. That was Tokyo, and he continued to destroy the city fairly regularly ever since. At least once per movie, he will destroy a different city, or participate in the destruction of another city, but he usually ends up in Tokyo. He destroyed New York once, but no one really likes to talk about that. He may also be a she, but it doesn't seem to be either. And it doesn't really matter because it has this atomic breath that destroys absolutely everything. That was the story in my head when I was stomping about, roaring and thrashing in my bedroom well into my 20s. It was an honor to finally pay tribute. Poking his head above the Toho Theater at the end of Godzilla Road is a life-size Godzilla. Life-size to 1954, of course. He's gotten much larger these days. Now let's take a moment to look at some real monsters. Welcome to Meguro Parasitological Museum, the world's only museum dedicated entirely to parasites. Animal parasites are displayed on the first floor. I've always been a fan of isopods, but sometimes it's not easy to stand up for a little guy that eats the tongue out of a fish and then assumes the life of that fish's tongue. Human parasites infest the second floor. I went to the world's largest tapeworm, an 8.8 meter terror that was removed from a man who ate some tainted sushi. The display has an accompanying replica that guests can stretch and play with. Historic texts on parasite research are kept under glass in a side room. My idea of a good lunch break is to sit down with my tofu and sprout sandwich for an episode of Monsters Inside Me. But all of this was a bit much for my producer, so he made an excuse about it being time to move on. Unfortunately, he was correct. Kappa was closing up early for a holiday when we arrived. A temple has stood in this neighborhood since 1657, but it was in the 1800s that the modern legend emerges, with a raincoat salesman protecting his home from the floods. Kihachi Kappa shared a name with a mythical turtle-like goblin called a Kappa. One day, while walking home, Kihachi encountered one of these creatures on the banks of the Sumida River following an annual flood that had destroyed the nearby town. Kappas are not known as friendly creatures, snaring the unwary at the edges of bodies of water and drowning their victims in the muck. A Kappa has a shallow depression in its skull, creating a dent at the top of its head that holds water at all times. If the water spills out, the Kappa will be sent back to the spirit realm, and since etiquette is very important to the Kappa, the creature will always reciprocate a bow, leaving the poor Kappas very easy to trick. For whatever reason, this Kappa decided to help Kihachi, building a footbridge across the Sumida River and embankments to prevent the area from flooding. The Kappa-dera temple was dedicated in honor to this creature, and locals ask for blessings by leaving cucumbers, the Kappa's favorite food, on the steps of the temple. I left a cucumber of my own and asked that the Kappas protect me on my next adventure.